Welcome to our Season 1 finale for All Things Automotive. We've been taking a journey from the edge to cloud and back over the course of 8 different episodes with some fantastic customers, partners, and AWS colleagues who've all shared their unique automotive solutions with you.
And today we decided to invite one of the premier automotive industry research firms, SBD Automotive, and we will dedicate this whole episode to look around the corner.
And what could be more exciting in automotive today than the topic of software-defined vehicles? If you've been watching, you've noticed that we've talked about this topic throughout multiple episodes, but it's time to dedicate an entire show to software-defined vehicles.
Yeah, it's time to build the new generation of vehicles and the whole new mobility. Let's go!
That's right, Stefano, let's roll. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dean Phillips, Worldwide Tech Lead for Automotive at AWS.
Hi, I'm Stefano Marzani. I'm Principal Specialist Solutions Architect in AWS.
I'm based in the Motor City in Detroit, Michigan. The automotive industry is in my blood. I have a passion for cars and everything about them. And when you combine that with my love for technology, I can't think of a better industry to be in at this time, or a better co-host to do the show with. Take it away, Stefano.
Thanks, Dean. It's an honor to be here with you. I'm from the Italian Motor Valley, land of good food and powerful engines, but loving computers as well. Now I'm in the Silicon Valley in California to try to get the best between cars and computers. And as the perfect combination between the two, right now I'm very much focused on autonomous vehicle technologies.
Hey, Stefano. As usual, I'm excited for this episode. I'm looking forward to talking with our friends from SBD Automotive.
We're at the finish line in our journey from the edge to the cloud and back. It's time to take a look back at all things automotive that make up the software-defined vehicle and review all that we've encountered along the way. We'll also take a look around the corner as we hit the gas on automotive industry transformation. Our expert guests from SBD Automotive have watched all the signs and inventoried all the driving forces behind the software-defined vehicle of the future. They'll guide us through the importance of SDVs on the automotive industry, covering everything from stages of transformation, challenges both the OEM and automotive ecosystem face, and the important role the cloud plays in this industry-wide shift. So stick around for this fast and furious season finale as we share the analyst perspective on software-defined vehicles with SBD Automotive.
Well, after that, I'm ready to go on a fast and furious road trip. What about you, Dean?
Absolutely. My bags are packed and ready to go. But before we bring on our guests, let's kick things off with a little discussion about current events in the industry. So let's get things going, Stefano. What's driving the news these days?
Yeah, let's start with, in the last episode, we spoke a lot about Ferrari, and I think you've been and enjoyed the Motor Valley Fest, right there. Yeah, so, and now we have the news about Formula One, to stay on the racing side of things. So they just revealed one interesting thing, the car design for the next season. Because, they want to create more wheel-to-wheel racing and more action on the track, overtakes, more dynamics between the drivers and so on. And they needed to work on a more aerodynamic vehicle design. And, the project was run using CFD, computational fluidodynamics, and thousands of compute cores on AWS. Exactly, it was 1,150 AWS compute cores, Graviton 2, that, by the way, that we talk about in in one of the last episodes. It's a lot. And they run over 500 million data points, and the model to impact one car a dynamic way on another. So it studied the interaction between cars, very interesting, and really leveraging AWS scalability. And even they were able to reduce the time by 80% from 60 hours down to 12. And, this really impresses me a lot, that things are becoming in a way that you start to work virtually, even before with real materials and stuff, and very efficiently and with high degree of complexity, really, like in this case, very complex simulation. And so very cool. But talking about complexity, we read some interesting news for autonomous vehicles too, right? To try to reduce it, at least on the legislation front.
Yeah, that's right, Stefano. A new standard was published, ISO 22737, if you've been following along. It's all about low-speed automated driving on predefined routes and includes guidance on the ODD, or the operational design domain definition, for the various autonomous maneuvers that take place, and as well as emergency procedures and testing specifications. Origo was a major contributor to the standard, as they're a UK company who deploys their vehicles globally, and they needed something to kind of help them communicate the level of safety their vehicles were operating under, so that it was well understood. And laws and regulations are really important, but can be kind of boring from a technology perspective. What do you think, Stefano? You've got something a little more interesting to share with us.
Yeah, it's a little bit boring, but very important topic. But yes, we read this really great blog post from Porsche Engineering this week, and provides a very good overview of autonomous vehicle, and I'd say automotive software development. They call it Big Loop, as they call it, and maybe we can pull it up. And it's a very appropriate name, in a certain sense it calls our Fast and Furious road trip, right, for this season, isn't it? So yeah, so as you can see here in the image, again, this is very interesting because it starts from the vehicle. And first of all, there's a vehicle, there are all the sensor, radar, ultrasonic camera, and this sensor is collected, right? All the sensor data is collected and transmitted to the backend. So, but the transmission itself is made in a way that you just select the data that is really interesting and send it to the big data lake, a construct that we discussed very, very much in other episodes of this season. And then they use this data, the interesting data, to generate and retrain neural networks that are then deployed to the vehicle. And the vehicle itself, you see, it's not using that version maybe immediately, but tests this new version in a shadow mode, and understand if the version is better than the one that is currently used. And then if it's absolutely better, then exchange this version with the current one, and they have an upgrade, an efficient upgrade, and this big loop starts back. So I think it was a very nice representation of this workflows. What do you think?
Yeah, I really like this drawing. I mean, it captures two things. One, it shows how the snapshot concept, where you take an interesting event that takes place, transmit all that data back to the cloud, put it in your MLOps cycle again, create new software, send it back to the vehicle, and then combined with the shadow concept, where you have a second version of the software running in the car, and you can test both at the same time. So really, really cool, and the picture does a great job explaining it. But there's another thing we've been discussing all season, and that's the whole issue around consolidation. I'm sure you've heard about what Magna did. They've acquired, or they're planning to acquire, Veoneer. And this will position them as a global leader in ADAS and autonomous technology. And of course, all indicators suggest that this consolidation will continue well into the future. But that said, you had some notes in here talking about sports. So what's up with that?
Yeah, last but not least, Olympics, from anthropomorphic, delivery bots, people movers, and most of them supplied by Toyota, one of our awesome AWS customers, by the way. So that was a sponsor of the Olympics. It's the first, of course, to see such a level of automation in Olympic. So this is a news, and a big one. So I recommend having a look at the links Dave is going to share. A very, very good display of high-tech robotics and autonomous mobility everywhere in Tokyo.
Yeah, definitely. The times, they are definitely changing. But you and I could keep talking about news forever, but we need to get going. Even if we were considering watching more about these IoT-enabled robots that give out Olympic medals on TV. But why don't we move on to introduce our guests?
So yeah, let's do it. And welcome to the show, Andy, Jeffrey. So it's such a pleasure having you here. So why don't we get started? Andy, would you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Stefano. Thank you, Dean. And thank you both for having us on the show. My name is Andy Hart. I'm the CEO of SBD Automotive, which is a market research and consultancy firm that works with car companies specifically around cases, so connectivity, autonomy, shared mobility, electrification, and security.
Thanks, Andy, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Dean.
Jeffrey. I mean, I was just going to say, we we had a chance to meet a while back, but why don't you introduce yourself?
Sounds great. Thanks so much for the AWS team for having me as well. My name is Jeffrey Hanna. I'm the Global Chief Commercial Officer of SBD Automotive. I'm here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I spend a lot of my day calling on key OEMs. And as you think about software-defined vehicle, we're a major inflection point. So look forward to speaking with you as well as our audience here today.
Yeah, thanks so much to both of you for joining the show. Looking forward to it. And now that we've got the intros out of the way, let's get under the hood and talk about software-defined vehicles with SBD Automotive. So Stefano, myself, and the automotive team here at AWS have been working really hard on the whole topic around software-defined vehicles for over a year now. We formulated some strong opinions on it, and we're really curious to hear what SBD has to say about it.
Exactly, Dean. I have a lot to say about it, but Andy, you guys just published a report on software-defined vehicles. So tell us from your perspective what it means to the industry.
Absolutely, yeah. So we've been working with car companies for a number of years now on their vehicle architecture strategies and kind of going up that stack and looking at how software is evolving in the car. And one of the things that we've noticed within the projects that we've been involved in is that there's a general misalignment in the vocabulary and the concepts that get used between different teams within car companies. So one of our goals within this report was to publish really the ultimate guide around what a software-defined vehicle means practically and how car companies can progress along that journey. And a key part of that is defining the common principles that define software-defined vehicles. And it starts with the basics around making sure that your car is connected and updatable. But beyond that, there's also a big effort now to abstract more of the software away from the hardware through standard interfaces to make sure that that software is portable and can be deployed across other vehicle platforms. Make sure that the software itself is loosely coupled from other types and parts of software within the vehicle and not highly dependent on other software. And ultimately to be able to create a much more dynamic experience, something that consumers can feel is fresh within the vehicle, that's highly customizable and highly personalized around what their needs are. And that's what we're seeing the demand from consumers as being.
Yeah, when we look at the importance of software and what are traditionally hardware and mechanically focused industries, why are we seeing the shift? I mean, why isn't it enough to just create products with, incredible physical design or, beautifully engineered engines or powertrains? I mean, I wonder about this. And Jeffrey, since my trip to the Italian Motor Valley, where I saw an entire supercar industry wrestling with their success, of the rich heritage they have, but also with this upcoming customer base that is demanding new hybrid and electrified powertrains. So what do you think about that?
Absolutely, Dean. And the change is happening and it's real, starting with a lot of those younger consumers. We saw really this shift, with VW sort of moving Bugatti to Rimac Porsche is really a validation that the next generation of supercars are one, going to be electric, and two, with a heavy engineering focus overall. So at SBD Automotive, we've tried to break down in sort of looking at this shift among a set of driving forces for software-defined vehicles. I think the first one, Dean, is really around a reduced bill of materials. SDVs require just less parts overall. And with the shift to things like zonal networks, reduced wiring, and even with the shift to EVs, you're going to see less powertrain overall. We're also seeing less recalls likely to happen. So working with many OEMs, just a small recall can be hundreds of millions of dollars. And the ability for OEMs now not only to update things like the infotainment center or the telematics module, but really all the OTA and ECU components throughout the vehicle, just make this migration much faster and much more efficient, much more pleasing for the customer. We're also seeing less reduced depreciation overall. So certainly things like freshness as the vehicle gets older. It'll be interesting to see even what happens with the book vehicle of vehicles overall. We had a recent blip where used vehicles were really more expensive than new vehicles. But imagine a world of fully updatable cars, and a car 1 year, 3 or 5 years old could potentially even increase value over time. And I think, as it equates to business model, things like ARPU. So really, as the margins are thin, we had a number of automakers talk in the last 2 weeks about increasing margin. And I think we need to get away from just this idea of 5 to 8% margins when they sell a car, but look at the downstream revenue from software delivered vehicle features.
Exactly.
And I think as that comes up, you need to look at what is the customer awareness for those, what would be the take rates. They're still unknown. We're working with a lot of customers at the moment to really think through what that's worth. And maybe we could pop up a few of the recent numbers here on the screen. These are direct from the OEMs themselves. So it's interesting on kind of these financial calls, they're looking at how much their business is repeatable and how much of their business is service oriented. So you look on the left, as Tesla's gone to sort of full self-driving features, they've taken a lot of money for the hardware, but of course that $199 is per month. So imagine the cash registering every month if you're out there at $200 per customer. Ford is saying $20 billion between now and 2030 in really these downstream revenues. And then big picture, you see all the way up to the trillions. Now, again, these are all forecasts, and it really will depend on execution, but it's a big part of the story.
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey. Really a wonderful explanation, really super clear why the sector is changing, right? And we even heard from one of our customers and partners in the previous episode that the huge cost, we were shocked of recalls. That's impressive for the sector. It's a huge cost. And the Tesla, I see that you can activate the subscription through the app. It's really awesome. So given all these benefits, it's clear, it's absolutely clear why SDV is such a high priority for OEMs. And Tesla is often put on the pedestal as being the disruptor in this field, right? So Andy, what stage is the rest of the industry?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the big questions that we tried to clarify within the report, because there hasn't traditionally been a standardized way of assessing where companies are on that kind of path towards software-defined vehicles. So we define kind of a set of generations from vehicle 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0 to 4.0, really to kind of help explain what the different generations are, with 1.0 really being the legacy, where we've come from, which is where you wanted to fit a new feature, you typically fitted a new box, and it was very function driven and required more and more hardware. And that's how you end up with 50 or 100 ECUs in the car. Vehicle 2.0 is where car companies have started to take an element of their experience around typically infotainment and build up a much more kind of high-tech substack around IVI. And I would say that's where the vast majority of vehicles being sold today are. It's a recognition that customers want digital cockpit experiences that at the very least match what they get on their smartphone in terms of apps. The next step after that is really around an updatable vehicle. And it's taking all of the kind of ECUs that you traditionally got in the car and starting to organize them into a more logical set of domains, typically around ADAS, around the cockpit, around kind of the body ECUs. And what we define as kind of vehicle 4.0, which is the truly software-defined vehicle, is really where you've got computing workloads that can be dynamically shifted between vehicle computers and offboard infrastructure. And that's ultimately what we see as the kind of nirvana. What's interesting is we talk a lot about Tesla. Actually, Tesla's platform in some ways is relatively old compared to what we're seeing from other startups and disruptors coming in who have the benefits of being able to develop something with a blank sheet of paper. And actually, none of the OEMs that we evaluate right now are at that kind of nirvana stage of vehicle 4.0. They've taken elements of the vehicle and they've taken elements of these definitions and incorporated them into different parts of their stack. But we're not yet seeing any vehicle manufacturers launching vehicle 4.0. The cutting edge OEMs, the disruptors like Tesla, like NIO, like XPeng in China, have the benefit of having more of a clean sheet approach. And we're seeing them pushing the boundaries. We're seeing a number of OEMs on the more traditional side of the spectrum introducing vehicle 3.0 level platforms, particularly as they bring in kind of fresh new EV platforms. But a lot of their other vehicles and a lot of their other platforms on the ICE side are still kind of in the vehicle 2.0. And a lot of OEMs are generally still in the kind of vehicle 2.0 side of the spectrum. One thing just to kind of end on is this isn't necessarily a race for everyone to end up at vehicle 4.0, at the fully software-defined vehicle. There's a lot that you can do with lower levels of software definition within the car, particularly for some markets that might not require top spec, or for some customer segments that might not need that level of functionality. So there's a lot of ways that you can optimize lower levels of vehicles in order to still be able to provide very good experiences.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's really interesting. And I was speaking with another colleague this morning, and we were talking about essentially hardware 1.0 or vehicle 1.0 as being the hardware defined vehicle.
Yeah.
And so, I think I really like the point you made about not everything will end up at the 4.0 stage, and maybe it's just a consolidation to a set of a smaller handful, if you will, of maybe domain-based control units that have the benefits of software-defined. But again, there's a lot that can happen. But Jeffrey, this challenge, I mean, this is what this is challenging all of these OEMs and what they're planning and how do they decide what their strategy is? What are some of those challenges that they're going to face?
Yeah, and we talked a lot, Dean, about the technical side, but a big part of this problem is organizational, right? And sadly, for the traditional automakers who have to support legacy architectures, they've really got two plans in place, right? So they've got to get things out the door and really innovate for the future. So some of those challenges are things like organizing and staffing, the move to agile and safe, and really creating the right culture. So it's really an arms race for recruiting the best developers. I was looking this morning, and literally, whether it's VW, Ford, Tesla, Toyota, they easily have 300 to over 1,000 job postings at the moment just for software developers overall. Now, you have to fit this into sort of an org structure, and you see how the org structures are changing there on the screen, but it's really taking that culture and development that was traditionally outsourced to a tier one or a supplier and really bring more and more of that in-house. So we've seen really a high correlation between the insourcing of software and the move to SDV 3.0 and where that's pushing overall. So obviously, you've got these things, and you've got things like platforms, customer innovation, customer demands, putting a lot of pressure on these. And if you get it wrong, the stakes are certainly high, but again, you can fix it over time. So we're advising our clients to make the move and then reiterate over time. And I think the end consumers are becoming more and more forgiving over time.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. And Jeffrey, culture, so important in developing software, right? It's not just throwing more personnel, throwing more developers to a problem that you solve it. Here in Silicon Valley, this is very well known. So that cultural thing in writing software, I think it's really important. Thanks for that. So Andy, what about the rest of the supply chain? Because it's not just OEM. I was talking with some friends that work in a company saying, yeah, with electric vehicles, we are going from making 40 components for a car to 5. So it's
Yeah,
it's a big change for the supply chain, right? To tier one suppliers. And what type of new players do you think will emerge because of SDV?
yeah, absolutely. It is a massive disruption, and particularly the tier one suppliers, they're increasingly being squeezed by OEMs that are kind of um, decreasing the number of ECUs in the car, which means fewer contracts, fewer opportunities to win business with OEMs, but also starting to take more responsibility in-house for the development of software. And on the other side, they're also getting squeezed by tier two suppliers who are becoming more capable, who are developing more automotive know-how, and squeezing them kind of even tighter. So for tier one suppliers, whether that be around system integration, software design and engineering, all the way to manufacturing, they're finding that their traditional business models are being challenged. And it's creating a new breed of what we call kind of tier zero point 0.5 suppliers, where it's not just about the traditional integrate and deliver business. It's more about a co-development approach to working alongside vehicle manufacturers and making sure that throughout the life cycle and development cycle of that product, tier ones remain relevant. And that's massively important. And as you mentioned, there are new opportunities coming on too. So where we're seeing kind of a breakdown of some of the big tier one monoliths, we're seeing new opportunities equally for smaller niche software players that will certainly drive new types of relationships within the industry.
Yeah, this transformation is really going to be hard, I think, on a lot of different sectors in the business. Just the Wall Street Journal a few days ago had an interesting article about this challenge just with the labor unions and how they're facing it and what they're demanding from government and from the OEMs for retraining the workforce. But ultimately, in the end, the number of jobs required has gone down significantly. So just really, really interesting inflection point. But I think we've reached the point where it's time in our show for the In the Shop segment. So let's roll up our sleeves and dive into the nuts and bolts of the topic, or we should probably say the bits and bytes. So Stefano, why don't you pop the hood and get us started?
Exactly. I'm ready with wrenches and computers, both of them. So that's the beauty of our job. So as we dive deeper, Andy, what's a good way to think of the different parts of the SDV stack?
Yeah, thanks, Stefano. It really is about bringing together a number of different layers, and it's all the way from the hardware and the electrical architecture up through the operating systems, the middleware, the applications, the services, all the way to the cloud. And all of these are kind of individual parts of the puzzle that basically all OEMs now are in some way or another addressing or have already in the market. The key is how you kind of bring all of those together in the most seamless way possible.
Yeah, so why don't we start from the bottom and we'll work our way up. I'm really interested to see, how the, high performance computing is the new horsepower for vehicles. So Jeffrey, why don't you take us through that? How do you see HPC in the vehicle really driving this new transformation for the industry?
Absolutely, and especially as you think about autonomous ADAS, the need for more capable computing power is dramatically rising almost exponentially overall. So as you mentioned, these requirements have given a way to a new form of really computing and really the role of high performance computers overall. So many of which offer multiple processing clusters for real time as well as general purpose computing, significantly more volatile, non-volatile memory, dedicated graphics processing, and high bandwidth network interfaces. And really the trick to all this and where we're working with our clients today is really how much computing is on the vehicle, how much you're doing at the edge, and then how much back up to the cloud. And really getting that mix right in near real time is a big one. So, HPCs are the foundation for the software-defined vehicle, and think of them as really that infrastructure that allows automakers to virtualize and abstract hardware for those higher level software services and applications. Now, the HPCs are putting more and more pressure on the supply chain. We're seeing more and more, sort of power from SoC and kind of building up the stack. And again, we talked earlier with Andy on kind of the pressure on the tier ones, but you're getting more and more requirements from really the end consumer in these use cases, as well as really more and more software being developed by the SoC folks, and they're really meeting the middle. And so the automakers in general are playing a bigger role in saying, I want that SoC, and really building from there. So it gets very complex, but that gives you a glimpse of really that foundation.
Yeah, really interesting. And I say that one of the challenges is abstracting without, let's say, losing some of the automotive properties like real time. Super interesting point for me. Absolutely interesting. So, but let's talking about software. So let's move further up in the stack and talk about that. So what are some of the biggest changes you're seeing in the area of in-car software, Andy?
Yeah, it's really, as we mentioned earlier, the decoupling of software and hardware. And traditionally, that's always been tightly coupled, which meant that if you had to make any kind of change, any major change to the software, chances are that it would be very costly. It would require potentially a hardware upgrade. So what we're seeing more and more is this abstraction layer where the hardware and the software are no longer as closely coupled. We're seeing a kind of greater importance associated with middleware and having kind of hardware agnostic interfaces that can integrate with different types of hardware. And the development of software as independent applications based on function or service that don't tie the software either tightly to other parts of software or to the hardware itself. And really what that means ultimately is that it can be much more easily updated. It can be developed more independently and released more in a more agile manner. And it also reduces a lot of the kind of hardware fragmentation that's plagued the automotive industry for many, many years. It's been one of the big pain points of managing software within the industry is having so many different variants of platforms that required so many different variants of software. And where the industry is going is very much where the IT industry is already gone, which is towards having more of a service fabric approach, where you really kind of break down everything to very kind of granular microservices that can be developed and operate independently of each other without necessarily having to kind of rely on some kind of a centralized computing function. And that's what we see on the kind of far right side of this slide is that evolution towards microservices.
Yeah, those microservices can become essentially virtual ECUs, which, once you have this capability, you can start to see maybe fluidity and where the compute takes place someday in the future. But that leaves us, with the cloud and or perhaps the edge of the network. And Jeff, what do you have to say about that?
Absolutely. So first of all, it's driven by use cases, right? So Automotive Cloud is driving not only AVs, but over-the-air updates, really securing the vehicle with VSOCs and cybersecurity, digital services, more and more personalization. Almost every automaker in the market has a connected personalization strategy, as well as more and more e-commerce. It's important to note, Dean, that really the cloud is not new to automakers. You've mentioned VW, Toyota, BMW really have made major bets on the cloud overall. And it really then becomes, how do you use the cloud in meaningful ways to really democratize the data? So where we've seen a lot of innovation in SBD Automotive is just the idea that teams can write applications to the cloud for deeper and deeper insights, not just for AV, but for marketing, for other things as well. So as you think about the near future, cloud services will more directly become integrated in really this end-to-end module and platform for managing software, data, etc. So kind of one analogy we use is sort of like DevOps for the car. And what I really liked about the AWS announcement with Continental is really looking at your mutual expertise, both on the cloud side, with the software side and bringing a lot of those skills into the automaker overall. And then finally, I would say we're seeing, already cars are super complex. We look at trims and variations and things. And now with this idea that you're going to have a one-to-many with adding features, this idea that you really do need a digital twin in the cloud. So the idea for those of you listening is really that the cloud has a one-to-one makeup of the software on board a vehicle. And then that data can be categorized, analyzed, utilized for the betterment of the business and ultimately the end consumer.
That's really awesome. And yes, definitely, we are very excited about our collaboration with Continental. We are seeing very interesting things coming from there. So absolutely. So, but we are at the end, unfortunately. So it's been really great, really, to have this look around the corner with you, Andy and Jeffrey. We are really in the midst of a profound disruption in the sector. And thanks very much for taking the time to talk with us about these important changes that are coming. And you presented them so clearly in an awesome way, really, absolutely. Cannot be more clear, in my opinion. And of course, I strongly recommend to read the full reports from SBD, where all this information are and even more structured. So again, thank you very much for your time today, Andy and Jeffrey. Really appreciated that.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Stefano.
you both. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Yeah, thank both of you. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed the conversation and looking forward to more in the future. So now's the time in our show where we share some resources along with upcoming events in the industry and some things that you might enjoy or find valuable. So Stefano, what's coming up around the corner?
So just before going around the corner, Dean, I think let's start talking about what just happened. So how did your visit to the Motor Valley go? We discussed about that in the episode. So can you tell us a little bit more?
It was absolutely incredible, the experience to kind of be hyper focused on in the automotive industry.
That's you right there in that square.
In one
That's you.
specific, yeah, that's me right there in front of a Ferrari 296 GTB. But yeah, it was awesome to be hyper focused on the Motor Valley and to listen to the future and some of the challenges that they're going through. I really like to see all those new vehicles. And then, of course, this 296 GTB was my favorite one. It was a beautiful car. But what's unique about this is it has two things I think are new for Ferrari or recently. So a V6 and a plug-in hybrid powertrain. This particular one, I think it has 0 to 100 kilometers per hour, around 60 miles per hour in 2.9 seconds. So that was really cool. That was my favorite one. But, hands down, the favorite conversation and kind of takeaway from the event was meeting Gianfranco Pizzuto, who is the founder and CEO of Automobili Estrema. And this translated means extreme automobile company. They're making a supercar. So Gianfranco has created the first street legal hypercar called the Estrema Fulminea, which I think that means extreme lightning or speed.
Lightning, lightning.
Yeah, lightning. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's going to be equipped with a hybrid battery pack, which has a combination of Avesta battery energy and engineering solid state cells that are paired with ultra capacitors. So he's going to have solid state tech in a car. And this hybrid pack was engineered and assembled in cooperation with a battery specialist, Imicar Electronic. So a couple of really interesting companies there. And these two different cell types are packed into two separate carbon composite cases with the ultra capacitors on the front, while the bigger one containing the cell to pack solid state lithium ion cells is positioned behind the cabin to kind of create that perfect weight distribution and low center of gravity for, a supercar. But yeah, it was really cool to talk to him about this new solid state tech. And I can't wait to see, how it progresses. And I wish Gianfranco and team all the success in the world.
Yeah, really awesome. You see, even in this discussion, right, you see battery packs, software-defined vehicle, everything in extreme cars, luxury cars brand. It's absolutely a wonderful moment to be in the automotive space. But let's look
Yeah.
around the corner for real, and let's talk about a couple of interesting events coming in this year. Two of them has to deal with ARM, an important partner for us. And we discussed about their Graviton 2, our Graviton 2 based on their new version 1 IP, even in this episode. So we have first the ARM Partner Meeting 2021 coming August 3rd and 5th. It's an invite-only event. Sorry, not all of you can participate, but if you are there, we'll be happy to meet and talk about what's going in there. It seems to be very nice, and we'll have some content there too. And then talking about ARM, you can be for sure in the Dev Summit 2021 in October from the 19th to the 21st, and we will be there all in with software-defined vehicles. So I will participate in a panel, and we are organizing a hands-on workshop on some cool tech stuff we are cooking right now.
Can't wait for that. Can't wait for that one. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then later in the year in September, I'll be doing a panel session at IAA in Frankfurt around electrification and electric vehicle adoption with some colleagues from Accenture, Polestar, Free2Move, and New Motion. So a lot of really cool companies focused on electrification in the industry. So that said, we hope you all enjoyed all the topics we covered today, and that David, our chat moderator, was able to address your questions in the chat and provide you with some valuable resources.
Yeah, and if you are catching this on demand, just send along comments or questions to Media Series live streams at Amazon.com or use the hashtag All Things Automotive.
All right, well, this wraps our first season, but we'll be back as we approach the annual AWS reInvent conference in December with a special edition of All Things Automotive at that event.
Yes, and in case you missed any of our first season episodes or just want a refresher or some of the great informative discussions we had, you can find them available online on our AWS homepage. And David will share the link in the chat.
And that brings to a close our first season journey from the edge to cloud and back on All Things Automotive. Stay tuned and watch for announcements about our second season.
Thanks so much for joining us, and especially in this season finale, let me thank all the awesome team that worked to make this possible.
For sure.
Michelle, Larry, Kian, Julia, and our awesome moderator, David, and all the folks creating the magic effects and providing tech support. Thanks. We hope to be back soon.